All right, whenever you're ready.
All right. I'm Michael, and today I'm going to be refuting Daniel's speech about his claim that laws restricting the rights of citizens to carry weapons encourages crime. So Daniel made 3 main points: that gun restrictions cause an increasing crime rate, more armed citizens improve safety, and the carry of guns helps deter violent crimes from occurring. So for the first claim, that gun restriction causes an increasing crime rate, I took a look into different evidence that would suggest, contrary to his point, that the gun restrictions do cause an increase in crime. His one main source, that in a Harvard study, that he cited a Harvard study in which 2 criminologists, Don Cates and Gary Mauser, they found that although the murder rates in other countries may have been higher, even though they have more gun restrictions, they did note that murder accomplished with firearms is very rare, like almost doesn't happen compared to the United States. Then he made a comparison of the high crime rate of Chicago to Japan. However, that's not necessarily a fair comparison to make, seeing that in Japan, gun restrictions are much more strict than here, and it's not necessarily a good comparison you can make for there. In a report by Robert Florida, a professor at the University of Toronto, he wrote in an analysis that of statewide firearm restrictions. He noted the correlations of how many restrictions there were to the homicide rates of each state, and he found in general that the correlation suggested there was that more gun restrictions correlated to lower crime rates. In an article in the Journal of Trauma by David Hemingway and Matthew Miller, they found that in developed nations where guns are more available, homicide is also more common. And this is Hemingway and Miller say this is true regardless of whether this is a different country or a U.S. state. Then Miller again and his colleagues published in the Journal of Social Science and Medicine. They found in the report that states with higher rates of household firearm ownership had significantly higher homicide victimization rates of men, women, and children. So, in general, what these statistical analyses of gun restrictions and how it might affect homicide rate, it generally shows that more guns present means there's going to be a higher homicide rate. Then in Daniel's second and third claims, they sort of were merged, I think. He cited an instance where a family fended off against the attackers, and he claims this demonstrates how it reduces the bully effect, he says, allowing a fighting, which allows for people to fight against any would-be attackers. However, this is only one instance, and it's not necessarily enough evidence to show that you can generalize from that one instance. So in short, Daniel cited a lot of evidence that suggested that there might be, that gun restrictions might cause an increase in crime. However, it's generally been found that gun restrictions tend to lead to a decline in the homicide rate. Thank you.
All right, well, you label the main and secondary claims pretty clearly, and you get on that first point. There's a very nice transition to that point, and so I know where you're going. It sounds like mostly you're going to be making a counterclaim on these issues. The first thing that you do is you find a quote from the advocate's own research. Now, what's problematic here is that once you've given me that quote, you don't tell me what that means. You need to make a declarative statement about what the position is. If you're saying that the researchers themselves say that this is insignificant information to be able to make a conclusion from, that would be a declarative statement. But you don't really say that. You just kind of have this general quote that says, well, they recognize that there are some countries that they have almost no guns, and so what does that mean? That we can't, that their research is completely worthless? I don't know what inference I'm supposed to draw from that. You need to be telling me what the inference is, and then I can look at the evidence and assess whether or not you've given me enough reason to believe that case. You challenge the comparison of Chicago to Japan, and I guess that was an argument that the advocate made, but I think your challenge there needs to be a little bit more thorough. You say the laws are different. Well, what's different about them? Didn't the advocate say that Chicago had very restrictive gun laws and they had high murder rates? So if there's a difference and it's not because of the gun laws, that would be something I think that you would want to be pointing out. Then I think you got some good counter evidence on this point, but you kind of try and let the evidence make the argument for you. You've got 2 or 3 quotes that you have here. Same sort of thing. I think that you've got good evidence on these points. What you need to do is make a claim from those points. And basically what you do is you present the 3 pieces of evidence, and then you kind of give us a conclusion at the end. Give us your claim first, and then we can see how the evidence supports that particular claim. It would be a lot clearer. And then I don't have to go back and reprocess what I've just heard and see if that supports that particular claim. I know what I'm listening to this evidence for, and I can process it as I'm listening to it. That would work better. So you do have a claim there, but it occurs after the 3 pieces of information instead of in front of them, and I think that makes a little bit of confusion. On the points 2 and 3, you kind of merged them. I guess you thought that the advocate merged them as well, and I suppose, I don't remember well if this was a debate. We'd have just heard the argument that their only evidence on this point was a single example that they had for both their number 2 and number 3 points. If that's the case, well, you've got a reasonable challenge to that. You explain why it might be problematic. I think there would be some ways to quantify that. We've got 1 case of self-defense. Well, let's contrast that to 16,000 cases of murder. So they've got a unique case. That's glad that that's happening, but we've got information that says high firearms have led to this kind of violence. Don't forget the 3 studies that I cited to you earlier that also show this sort of thing. If we're going to make generalizations, who's made the stronger generalization here? That's our position. So you need to do a little bit more contrasting on those issues, okay? All right, thank you.